Ricky, I have some black plastic tongs that'll be very gentle for the kitty cat. I think with those tongs, I can grab the kitty by the nape of the neck, like the mother does, and just take the cat right out from 5 feet away.
Oh, please, dude. Oh, no! Not there. Oh, God.
For 6 seasons, Billy Bretherton walked into situations most people would run from and made it look almost effortless. As the face of Billy the Exterminator, he turned everyday pest control jobs into must-watch television, bringing snakes, bees, and other unexpected encounters straight into millions of living rooms. But when the show ended, the story didn't feel finished. Soon after, rumors began to circulate, questions went unanswered, and over time, the version of events that reached the public started to drift further from what actually happened behind the scenes. So, what really happened to Billy Bretherton after the cameras stopped rolling? And why has so much of his story remained unclear for years? Join us as we uncover what happened to Billy the Exterminator, the kid who wanted to be a cop. Before Billy Bretherton became a television personality that fans grew attached to, he was just an ambitious kid from Louisiana. He had one dream, and that was to work in law enforcement. He wanted a badge, a structure, a career on the side of order. The pest control path was already built into his family name and the company his parents ran. But his own plans pointed somewhere totally different. He was born into a family whose roots were planted deep in Bossier City, Louisiana. His parents, Big Bill and Donnie Bretherton, ran Vexcon Animal and Pest Control, a local operation handling the kinds of wildlife and infestation situations that homeowners in the American South deal with regularly. He grew up around the work and absorbed its rhythms through observations. He knew what a trapped animal looked like. He knew what a serious infestation smelled like before the source was found. He knew all of this before he ever made a professional decision to do the work himself. Billy spent part of his youth at Frankfurt American High School in Frankfurt, Germany, graduating in 1992. The experience of growing up between countries and building a sense of self across constantly shifting environments gave him the adaptability that pest control demanded in its own way. One of which is the ability to walk into any environment and assess it clearly without letting personal discomfort interfere. He joined the Air Force after school, served briefly, and came home to Louisiana. His first marriage happened during that period and unfortunately did not last. He returned to Bossier City, rejoined the family business, and eventually found both the professional direction and the personal partnership that would define the years that followed. He married Mary, his second wife, and she became a consistent presence in both his life and, for a time, in the show that was still years away from existing. The family business he returned to ran on the trust that only a family name can build in a local market. Vexcon was known, and Brethertons were also famous. When something was living in one's crawling space that should not be there, these were the people to be called. Billy and his younger brother Ricky both worked for the company alongside their parents, creating the family enterprise dynamic that the show would eventually put on national television. But before the television audience arrived, Billy needed to be discovered. And the way it happened had nothing to do with any plan he had made. So how does a man from a pest control family in Bossier City end up with his own nationally broadcast show on A&E, the show nobody planned? The path from Vexcon Animal and Pest Control to 6 seasons on A&E began with Mike Rowe and a show about jobs nobody wanted to do. Dirty Jobs was the Discovery Channel series that sent its host into the most unpleasant working environments in America to document what the jobs nobody else wanted actually looked like from the inside. Pest control in Louisiana qualified easily. Vexcon fits the format perfectly. Mike Rowe came to Bossier City. The cameras rolled, and something happened that nobody in the room had anticipated. Billy Bretherton was not skilled in being an entertainer in any sense. He was doing what he had always done, explaining to homeowners what was happening in their homes, handling the animals with a gentleness that surprised people who expected an exterminator to operate purely in the business of elimination, and generating a quality of on-camera ease that most people who try to be good on television never manage to find because it cannot be manufactured. A&E saw the Dirty Jobs episode and contacted the family about building a show around him. The show was going to be called The Exterminators, a title Billy himself had suggested. The network changed it. They recognized that the concept and the person were inseparable, and the new title reflected that. Billy the Exterminator put his name front and center and made the relationship between the person and the program explicit from the very first frame. The visual identity he brought to the show was unlike anything else in the reality television landscape of the late 2000s. Spiked accessories, dark clothing, long hair, an overall aesthetic that belonged in the front row at a metal concert rather than in a suburban pest removal service. The difference between how he looked and how he actually behaved was not designed for television effect. It was simply the authentic expression of who he was. People who saw him and expected aggression or indifference found instead someone who would explain at length why relocating a wasp colony was a better outcome than destroying it. The show worked because the character it was built around was not a character. The family dimension added a touch of reality that the pest control premise alone could not have provided. Big Bill was the warm patriarch who held the operational side of VexCon together. Donnie was equally central to the business. Ricky provided the sibling dynamic that gave Billy someone to push against and someone to rely on at the same time. The show was not just about bugs and snakes. It was about a family that had built something together and was still in the middle of the complicated ongoing work of being a family while also being a business. The show ran from 2009 and for 6 seasons was exactly what A&E needed it to be. And then 2012 arrived, and the structure holding everything together started to crack in multiple places at once. So what exactly happened that year, and why did it bring the entire operation to a sudden stop? The show's quiet end. On June 1st, 2012, Billy Bretherton and his wife Mary were stopped by the Bossier City Police Department. The officers searched their vehicle and found synthetic marijuana and smoking paraphernalia. They were charged with drug possession and were arrested. The charges against Mary were eventually dropped. Billy was not so fortunate. He received a 60-day prison sentence, a $500 fine, mandatory community service, and a requirement to complete a rehabilitation program. He served the sentence, paid the fine, completed the community service, and went through the rehabilitation process. The consequences of what had happened during that car stop were real, and they were faced. A&E was in a position nobody at the network would have chosen. Its lead talent was legally unavailable during a period when the show should have been producing new content and was publicly associated with a story that ran directly against the family-friendly image 6 seasons of pest control television had carefully built. The network responded not with a formal announcement, but with silence. New episodes simply stopped appearing. There was no farewell season or final episode that gave the audience or the people in the show any proper closure. The show that had been running stopped running the way things stop when the circumstances that made them possible are suddenly removed. The coverage surrounding the arrest was extensive and not always accurate. The specific details of what had been found and what the charges entailed got blurred in the retelling, and the version of Billy that emerged from some of the coverage was considerably darker than the actual facts supported. He had made a mistake. He had faced real consequences for it. He had served his time, paid his obligations to the court, and completed the requirements placed on him. That full picture was less dramatic than the tabloid version, and therefore received less attention. What the coverage almost entirely missed was what was simultaneously happening at VexCon, where the tensions inside the family business had been building for years, and where the arrest had accelerated a conflict that was already approaching, something that could not be managed quietly. So, what was actually happening inside the Bretherton family business, and why did it eventually send Billy across the country to start over from scratch? The family business and the falling out. The Bretherton family had been doing pest control together long enough that the relationships inside VexCon had the specific compressed quality of people who have spent years in close quarters managing both the work and each other simultaneously. When it worked, it produced the warmth that viewers had responded to across 6 seasons. When it stopped working, it produced the kind of conflict that family businesses generate specifically because the personal and professional layers are so completely entangled that separating one from the other becomes nearly impossible. Billy left VexCon and moved to Illinois in 2012, citing personal and family issues with the company as his reason for going. The nature of whatever happened between him and his parents and his brother Ricky was something he declined to discuss in detail publicly. He said there were issues. He said they were serious enough that leaving was the only workable resolution. And then he packed up and left Louisiana for the Midwest. A 2017 formal firing from VexCon suggests that the story of his relationship with the company after his departure was more complicated than a clean break. Some professional connection clearly persisted or was re-established in the years between his move and the formal termination, and that connection eventually ended in a way that was official enough to be described as a firing rather than a voluntary separation. The show had always traded on the warmth of a family working together and the specific comedy and friction that close working relationships between relatives reliably produce. The version of the family that the cameras showed was real, but it was partial. It captured moments of genuine connection while the pressures building underneath those moments remained off-screen. For Billy, leaving Louisiana meant leaving behind not just the job and the family company, but the entire context in which his adult identity had been formed. He was a person whose television fame had been built entirely on his relationship to a specific place, a specific community, and a specific set of professional skills that he had developed in that place over more than 2 decades. Moving to Illinois and starting over without any of that infrastructure required a different kind of resilience than anything the show had documented. What he built from that starting point was quieter than what the show had been, but it turned out to have its own sustainability. So what did Billy Bretherton actually do with the years after the show ended and the family business was behind him? And how did an unlikely Canadian production offer change the direction of everything? The return that changed the story. Billy Goes North was the show nobody expected to exist. In 2016, working with Chorus Entertainment and Proper Television, Billy Bretherton filmed a new series that aired on CMT in Canada, putting him in the pest and wildlife situations that northern climates produce. New animals, new environments, new problem sets require new solutions. A Billy who was visibly older and carrying more visible experience than the one who had launched the A&E show 7 years earlier, but recognizably the same person in every quality that had made the original work. The Canadian show was picked up by the American market the following year and broadcast as the 7th season of Billy the Exterminator, giving the audience that had been watching since 2009 one more run under the original title. The season aired and concluded without launching a continuing production cycle. But its existence proved something that the silence following the 2012 cancellation had put in doubt. Billy was still doing the work. The years of difficulty had not taken that away. The YouTube presence developed in parallel with the Canadian project. He appeared on his son Bryce's TikTok channel, building a multi-generational family content presence that operated on completely different terms from the A and E years. He also did a digital series with his brother Ricky called VexCon The Exterminators, returning to the professional partnership and the shared family identity that the television years had made famous. The digital content had a quality the television show had always gestured toward but could never fully achieve. It was unpolished in a way that felt honest rather than amateur. The situations were real because nobody was staging them. The reactions were genuine because there was no take two for an animal that had no interest in cooperating with a camera. For the audience that had always responded most strongly to the authenticity in the original show, the YouTube content delivered that quality in a purer and less mediated form. The Illinois years also produced their own legal complications separate from the Louisiana arrest. He was arrested for marijuana possession in Chicago during the period after his move, adding another chapter to a legal history that had already been more complicated than anyone watching the show had expected. He moved through those complications the way he had moved through the previous ones, facing them and continuing. And then something happened that the most pessimistic readings of the Bretherton family situation had not predicted. The falling out that had ended the show and sent Billy to Illinois turned out not to be permanent. So how did the reconciliation with his family actually happen? And what does the picture look like today? The return to VexCon. The VexCon official website is the most honest document available about where things actually stand with the Bretherton family and the business they built together. It lists Billy, Ricky, and Bryce among its current personnel, confirming that Billy is still associated with the company his parents founded, the company that the television show was built around, and the company from which he had departed under painful circumstances more than a decade ago. The reconciliation, whenever it happened and however it was reached, happened privately. There was no press release announcing the restoration of the relationship or a television appearance where Billy and his brother sat down and explained what had gone wrong and how they had worked through it. Just two brothers doing pest control again, the way they had before the cameras arrived, before 6 seasons of national television made their family famous, and before whatever happened between them made that impossible for a stretch of years that eventually ended. His net worth is estimated at approximately $3 million. The combination of television income across multiple seasons of multiple shows and the sustained income from pest control work that has continued regardless of what was or was not airing on television in any given year. He is not wealthy by the standards of the entertainment industry. He is a working person who has built something real across decades of genuine professional effort, and who still has access to that thing. The marriage to Mary has endured through the complications of the arrest, the legal proceedings, the family falling out, and the years of rebuilding that followed. The two have gone through all of it together, which is something the rumor mill consistently predicted would not be possible, and which turned out to be wrong in the same way the rumor mill tends to be wrong about the private realities of people it does not actually know. The show that made him famous has not returned in its original form, but the man at the center of it is still out there, still catching animals that have moved into places they should not be, still explaining to homeowners why the creature in their basement is not their enemy, still approaching every job with the combination of knowledge and genuine affection that made 6 seasons of television worth watching for millions of people who had never previously given a moment's thought to the private lives of the animals sharing their walls. The real story of what happened to Billy Bretherton after Billy the Exterminator is not the dramatic collapse that the internet's version suggested. It is the quieter story of a person who went through real difficulty, lost real things that mattered to him, navigated years of rebuilding without the platform that had made him visible, and eventually returned to the work and the family that were always the actual foundation of his life. he is still catching snakes. VexCon is still answering calls. And that is considerably more honest and considerably more human than the version that went viral. What caused the fight in the first place? And when you think back on that conflict, who do you believe stepped in as the turning point or mediator that ultimately helped resolve the divide? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.